So I'm sure you've heard of this phrase before. The trend is your best friend. And I think this phrase is very important in the stock market because in the stock market, you definitely want to go along with the trend. You don't want to go against the trend. All right. And the key here is that in order to know that you're along with the trend or not go against the trend, you must know if the trend is up or down. All right. If the trend is up, that's where you want to think about buying, about being in the same direction as the uptrend. And if the trend is down, it means prices are pushing lower and lower and lower, then you don't want to think about buying, all right? In fact, you want to get out if you're holding on to positions, or maybe you could think about riding the downtrend, taking like short positions to ride the downside. So the trend is your best friend. And how do we actually tell the trend of any single stock or the market? Hey guys, Joey here, top tier MyZero trader in Philip Securities. And in this video, I'm talking about trend, right? Whereby we can use certain indicators to help us to identify the trend, whether it's up or down or sideways. And we can use what we call moving averages. So watch this video all the way to the end if you know how to tell the trend of any single stock in less than a few seconds and ride the trend. So first of all, when we're talking about trend, we want to know about the time period of the trend that we are talking about. So is it like a short-term trend? Are we talking about the longer-term trend? What exactly are we talking about? All right, so let's just focus on what we call the longer-term trend. That means we look at a stock whereby over a period of a year or two, if the trend is up or down, are we forming higher lows or higher highs, or are we actually pushing lower? So how can we do that? It's very simple. We can pull out what we call the 200 days moving average. So there are many days of period of moving average. It could be 50 days, 80, 100, 120, 150. But I think for the longer term trend, if you look at the stock in terms of a 1 year to 2 year outlook, you can just focus on what we call the 200 days moving average. So I really just put out this line right here. You can see that this is what we call a blue line, all right? That is a longer term moving average. It's a 200 days simple moving average, all right? And just by this line, we can tell if the trend is up or down in the longer term. Remember, we are just focusing on the longer term trend. Later, then we look at maybe the shorter term trend. But now, we want to look at the big picture first. We're going to zoom out, look at it over the year or two, and determine the longer term trend. Is this stock in an uptrend or downtrend in the longer term over a period of a year or two? So how do we tell that? You can see that very simple. We can look at this line, whether is it moving up or down. All right, so when the line, you can see right over here, this blue line was moving up, right? You can see this blue line is moving up, right over here. So when the line, the 200 days moving average line is pointing up, right? It could be gently sloping up, it could be aggressively pointing up, but as long as it points up and prices is above this line, can you see right over here, prices above it, and the line is pointing up, well, we are pretty much in a longer term uptrend. All right, and if, all right, the line were to start to flatten out, well, that could mean that the trend could potentially turn from up to sideways, and eventually you can see that when this line starts to turn down with prices now going below it, you can see, right? So prices are kind of like below this blue line, then I would say that the longer term trend has turned down. And that's where you want to be careful. If you're holding on to like long positions, you're holding on to it, you bought it previously, you might want to think about getting out because there could be more downside, right? You could push lower. That's where you could, from profits, you could be actually wiping out your profits and maybe heading into losses as well. So you want to get out if there are any signs of the trend turning from up to down. All right, and somewhere around here you can see that this blue line, same thing, is started to flatten out, right? So once it starts to flatten out, there could be a potential change of the trend. Same thing from down to sideways and potentially moving up. So how do we know whether is it back to an uptrend? Well, very simple. You can take a look at it again. You can see that this blue line, the 200 days moving average line, started to flatten out and eventually pointed up, right? Started to point up with prices now above this blue line. You can see right now that the 200 days moving average line, obviously it is still pointing up, prices still above it, so the longer term uptrend is still intact. And that's the, these are pretty much stocks that you want to think about buying, about holding on in the longer term to ride more upside. Alright, and of course, in the short term, we can also see like weakness. It might just pull back or retrace back down a little bit towards some support levels. But in general, right, the longer term trend looks intact as long as we stay above this blue line, which is still pointing up, prices above it. It is still good to ride the uptrend. So that is pretty much the 200 days moving average blue line to gauge what we call the longer term trend. And there's another thing that we can do to further affirm the trend in the mid to long term as well. So let me just remove all this drawing, all right, and we can pull out another line that is what we call 100 days moving average, right? So we have the 200 days moving average. Now this is what we call 100 days moving average, whereby it is a little bit more sensitive to prices. It follows prices a little bit closer, but now with these two moving averages on the chart itself, it allows us to gauge the trend from the mid to long term as well. So we can get more confirmation by pulling out what we call the 100 days moving average, which is right over here. You can see that now there is another line out on the chart. It's what we call the 100 days moving average, and it is a red line. All right, so how do we tell the trend by these two lines? All right, very simple. You can see that right over here, when these two lines are pointing up, that means the 100 days moving average and the 200 days moving average blue line, they are both pointing up. And the red line, all right, so essentially the shorter term moving average must be above the longer term moving average. So red above the blue, both pointing up, I would say that we are pretty much in an uptrend. And when right over here, you can see that when the 100 days moving average line, you can see the red line, 100 days moving average, started to see a crossover to the downside. So the red line, 100 days moving average, cross down below the blue line, below the 200 days moving average. Well, that could be a sign of a potential change in trend from up to down just by looking at this crossover to the downside. And you see, right, when it crossover, the red started to point down, the blue point down, red below the blue. This is what we call a downtrend. Are you guys following so far? All right. And finally, somewhere over here as well, you can see that we managed to see a crossover back to the upside right over here. So now the red line, 100 days moving average, has gone down, 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 started to flatten out, started to point up, and finally we crossed back above the blue line, the 200 days moving average. So that's why we get more confirmation of the uptrend taking shape again, all right, when the red goes above the blue, and both the 100 days moving average, the red line, points up, the blue line, the 200 days moving average, points up as well with the red above the blue. You can see right now both of them are still pointing up, and the red is still above the blue. All right, so the longer term trend still looks intact for this company, all right, just by looking at what we call the red line and the blue line. So let's take a look at another case study. All right, you can see that I've put out the same two lines, right? The 100 days moving average, the red line, and the blue line, the 200 days moving average. So this is spot. You can see that right over here since 2021, we got some signs of the downtrend forming. It was very strong uptrend. We saw the 100 days red line crossing down below the blue line, and both of these lines started to point down. You can see right over here, we started forming what we call lower highs, and we just traded lower and lower red below the blue, both pointing down, 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 until somewhere around here, right over here, somewhere around like March 2023, we started to see the 100 days moving average line flatten out, pointing up, and eventually crossing back above the 200 days moving average line, which also started to slope up as well. So you can see right now that both of these two lines, the red and the blue line, the longer term moving averages line, they are all pointing up. The 100 days is still above the blue line. So the longer term uptrend looks intact for this company, and that's the reason why we want to ride companies like this, right? Stocks which are strong, that are in an uptrend. There could be some short-term weakness here and there, but essentially we are along with the trend. And looking at this statement again, the trend is your best friend. So most people like to, avoid companies like this because they feel that maybe they have already gone up, right? It's too expensive. Maybe they want to wait for a retracement back down, maybe wait for it to come back down all the way back at the bottom again. But for companies like this, that have already turned into an uptrend. There's a reason why they're strong, there's a reason why they are reversing up, and there could be more legs to the rally, right? So we want to be prepared to ride companies like this whereby they have already shown signs of a reversal, or maybe showing signs of an uptrend continuing even further. So now that we have looked at what we call the longer term trend of a stock, and we understand that we want to take trades along with the longer term trend at least, so that we are not against the trend, well, then how do we know if we are actually against or along with the short-term trend? All right, so we have talked about the longer-term trend, but what about the short-term trend? Are we actually going against the shorter-term trend while we are along with the longer-term trend? All right, so we want to try to always be in the same direction as both the longer-term and the shorter term. So most people, confuse it whether they might be in the same direction as a longer term trend, but actually in the shorter term they might actually be going against the trend. So we always want to try to be in the same direction, or along with both of these trends, whether is it the shorter term or the longer term. So how do we tell the shorter term trend of any stock? Right, well, very simple. We can see that. Let me just go ahead to clear out all these lines right over here, and we can pull out what we call another shorter term moving average, and I use what we call the 20 days moving average. That is what we call the green line right over here. All right, so you can see that now I have another line that is green in color. All right, and that's what we call the 20 days moving average that reacts very I would say sensitively to prices. It's a short-term moving average, so when price moves up and down, you can see that the line tends to follow prices quite closely, I mean compared to the red and the blue line, which are longer-term moving averages. All right, so you can see right over here that when the longer-term trend was up right over here, you look up and you can see that the green line was also pointing up all the way up over here. So that was when both the longer term trend was up and the shorter term trend was up, and that's a good thing, right? That's where you want to ride companies whereby not only the longer term trend is up, but also the shorter term trend is up, right? And same thing, how do we know if the shorter term trend is up? Well, when the green line, can see this 20 days moving average line is pointing up. So it must be pointing up first thing, right? It cannot be pointing down. If it's pointing down, like maybe over here at this period, can you see right over here, you can see that the 20 days moving average line is pointing down. You can see pointing down, and that is where the shorter term trend is down, right? So it must be pointing up, like you see over here, it starts to point up. Great, that is where the shorter term trend have turned up as well. So right, prices above the 20 days moving average, with the 20 days moving average, the green line pointing up, that's a sign of the shorter term trend turning up, and that's where you could ride this stock when both the shorter term trend and the longer term trend is both up. So after the rally, you could see that the shorter term trend also started to turn down, with the green line, the 20 days moving average line, pointing down, with prices going down below it. So that's where you could see some short term weakness, and if you're holding on to stocks like this, you could also take the opportunity to get out first, because we may head lower in the short term, maybe to the next support, and that's where you could time your entry to get in again. Or if the shorter term trend were to turn up, you can see that right over here, the 20 days moving average line was pointing down, down, down. So you can see prices kind of like pushing lower for about 3 weeks, just headed down, down, down. We found a support. 20 days moving average line started to flatten out, and yes, eventually pointing up. Prices goes above it, and that is where the shorter term trend has turned up. So that's how you could position yourselves to get back in again when now the shorter term trend is up, and obviously the longer term trend has already stayed up and started to point up, flatten out, point up, up, up. So shorter term trend is up, 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 flat, and you can see right now that this green line, the 20 days moving average green line, it is obviously pointing up right now with prices above it. So you can see right now, if you ask me what is the shorter term trend, it is up. The longer term trend is up. There could be more upside for this stock, and we could kind of like gauge the support level. So we might be seeing maybe a bit of support around that 210 level. So with prices holding above it, there could be an entry above this support, because both the trends in the shorter term and the longer term trends are up, right? So you could time your entry to get in near support to ride more upside, or maybe a rebound from the current support level. Okay, one more last case study, AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. You can see right over here, we managed to see a bottom right over here. We touched about 2 times near the $95, all right, and all this while the trend in the longer term was up, just by looking at what we call the 100 days moving average, the red line and the blue line. So it was a downtrend in 2022. You can see right over here, both lines pointing down. It turned into an uptrend somewhere in April 2023. And the longer term trend was up. You can see right now it is still up, but somewhere along the line, we did see some weakness in the short-term trend. So as I mentioned, right, we want to try to be in the same direction as the trend, not just in the longer term, but also in the shorter term. So if the longer term trend is up, but the shorter term trend is down, that means the 20 days moving average line is pointing down, we want to hold first. We want to hold our guns. We want to wait at least for the shorter term trend to start to turn out, maybe start to flatten out, signs of it pointing up. That's where you could time your entry to get in, because when that happens, then all the trends are pointing up, not just the longer term, but also the short term. So you can see right over here somewhere in June, we did see some weakness, right, with the 20 days moving average line pointing up, and it starts to point down, right? You can see, you started to see what we call lower highs. It starts going lower and lower. In fact, we can also draw what we call a downward sloping channel resistance line connecting what we call the highs, right, forming lower highs. So a bit of a downtrend, I would say, like 4 or 5 months, it just hits lower and lower. And let's take a look at when the shorter term trend actually started to turn up. Well, somewhere over here, right, you can see that the line was pointing down, the green line specifically, right? So when the green line, the 20 days moving average line, started to flatten out and point up right around here, can you see right over here, whereby now the 20 days moving average line started to point up, right? It kind of broke what we call maybe the 110th resistance level. There could be a little bit of resistance here. We broke above it. Green line points up. Prices above the green line. You can see this green line, it is still pointing up right now. So the shorter term trend has turned up since like November for about 3 months, and obviously it is still pointing up. All right, so that is how the shorter term trend has turned up, and when that happens, you could ride all the upwards direction in terms of the longer term trend and the shorter term trend. Alright guys, that's it. So I hope you like this video. We have pretty much talked about how we can just use moving averages, right? You can pull this out from any indicators on your charts, and you can pull out what we call the 100 days moving average, the red line. The blue line would be the 200 days moving average, the longer term trend, and even the 20 days moving average green line, which gauge the shorter term trend. Alright, so I hope you have a better idea of how do we gauge the trend in the longer term, in the short term, and how do we want to think about taking trades only when all the trends are pointing up, and not just when one is up and one is down. We are pretty much against one of it, right? So only when all the trends are up, we could think about taking trades along with the trend. And you can phrase, right, the trend is your best friend, whereby you take trades along with the trend. So Joey here, thank you so much for watching, right? And if you like this video, guys, go ahead to give me a like, smash the subscribe button as well, so that you will not miss out on any videos like this. And if you want to find out a little bit more on the entire strategy, I have a strategy called One Good Trend. This is just pretty much one part of it, but we haven't dived into things like the support and resistance, potential entry zones, exit zones. So if you want to find out about the whole entire picture, or not just about the trend, but essentially when do you get in, when do you get out, how do we know what stocks to even focus on, and how we have a software or system to guide us on entry and exit, and also alerts us on high probability winning stocks. Well, you can attend one of those free web classes that I'm still running. Alright, the link is right below this video. Click on it, register for this web class where I'll share with you a bit more, and I'm sure you can take away something as well. So Joey here, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next web class or in the next video. Take care.